The great Imperium of Rome had seen possibly the greatest era of prosperity mankind had ever known. A wealthy and prosperous merchant elite arose, exploiting market opportunities to trade goods across vast distances. This trade was facilitated by vast public works projects, including extensive roads and transportation infrastructure, as well as a system of aqueducts which provided water supplies not only to the common people but to traveling merchants as well. In addition, the Roman military, especially the navy, fought back the hordes of pirates and ensured that the merchants were effectively protected. This era of stability and economic prosperity was known as Pax Romana. The foundation of any economy, of course, is a medium of exchange, a currency. Unusually, the Roman Republic did not adopt any form of coinage, any real medium of exchange, until approximately 300 BC. The Greek colonies in southern Italy had already been utilizing a form of coinage centuries prior to the Roman Republic. And in fact, it was the Greek culture that largely inspired Rome in attempting to achieve the formation of a stable currency that could be used to facilitate trade and commerce. The first attempts of the Roman Republic really to secure this form of currency are seen in 300 BC, during the early militarization of the state. The ius signatum is the earliest known form of coinage for the Romans, and it's seen as struck bronze bars, approximately 1,500 to 1,600 grams, 160 by 90 millimeters. These primitive coins soon evolved, following the currency reforms of the Second Punic War and the emergence of the Roman Empire, to become a standard form of coinage. With the famous reign of Augustus came the first hint of a link between the sovereignty of an emperor, an imperator, and the establishment of a currency. Augustus created provincial currencies for the Roman provinces, as well as strengthening the imperial medium of exchange, facilitating trade and commerce. Along with Augustus, we see the first real attempts of the Romans to use iconography in establishing their coinage. The Tresuiri Monetales, the so-called trio of moneymen, were largely young politicians who determined what icons to place on the currency. These young politicians largely aspired to become senators, and the position was originally created in 289 BC, lasting well into the crisis of the 3rd century. This emphasis on iconography we can first see clearly under the reign of Julius Caesar, and then accelerate under the imperial cult of Augustus, reaching its fruition under the height of the empire established under Trajan. While this strange focus on the iconography of the coinage may seem somewhat trivial to us today, it was absolutely essential to the Roman culture at the time. Historically, periods of Roman expansion and military conquest were associated with the unique focus on establishing the emperor's sovereignty through the images on the coins. Following the crisis of the 3rd century and the collapse of Roman rule, this focus on ensuring the iconography of the coins effectively displayed the imperial rule largely deteriorated. Thus, we see that there is a direct correlation between the health and strength of the empire and the iconography of its coinage. You can see in this chart just a few examples of the beautiful Roman coinage. Perhaps one of the most important coins during the period of Pax Romana was the sestertius, used from 23 BCE to 250 CE, around the time of the crisis of the 3rd century. It weighed approximately 20 to 30 grams and measured 35 millimeters. It was used for the purposes of tax collection and for funding large infrastructure and military projects. The denarius was used more by the common man in micro-scale trade and commerce, and was used over a longer time period, from 211 BCE to 241 CE. It was worth approximately 1/4 that of the sestertios. During the later period of the Roman Empire, other coins took up importance, including the Antonianianos, which weighed approximately 3 to 5 grams and measured about 21 millimeters. This change of coinage is associated with economic instability in ancient Rome. The debasement of the Roman currency, reducing the value of the coinage, was largely associated with this type of economic instability. While Caligula did somewhat debase the coinage, we didn't really see a full reduction in the coin's values until the reign of Diocletian, when the Antonianianos was largely changed and its value was significantly reduced. In this chart, you can see how the value of the Antonianianos changed over time. The debasement of the currency was largely an economic measure taken to fund the vast wars with Parthia, as well as fight the rising insurgency both within and just beyond the borders of the empire. The pressure of war largely forced the Roman treasury to debase the currency so that it could afford to not only increase the pay for personnel and the increasing focus on mercenaries, but also afford the increasing equipment costs needed to effectively fight the Roman enemies. Ironically, this funding of war largely was responsible for the economic collapse of the empire both during the crisis of the 3rd century and afterwards. To truly understand the debasement of the Roman currency and the subsequent instability of the economy of ancient Rome, we must first understand the geopolitical situation at work in Eurasia during the crisis of the 3rd century. Rome depended on steady trade and commerce with ancient China through a series of intermediate merchants in Persia, India, and Central Asia. This trade constituted perhaps more than 5% of the Roman economy and was disproportionately important because all the luxury goods consumed by the wealthy class in Rome ultimately found their origin in the East. The Kushan Empire, a loose coalition of Central Asian tribes, disrupted this trade by levying massive tariffs on traveling merchants while failing to protect them from thieves and bandits. Unlike the Roman Empire, which fostered trade and commerce through heavy investment in infrastructure and law and order, the Kushan Empire failed to effectively sponsor trade and commerce, and soon the vast trade networks linking Rome with the East deteriorated. This may have been responsible for the collapse of the Roman economy during the crisis of the 3rd century, or at least may have been an important contributing factor. As the Persian government lost tax revenue due to the dissipation of Roman Han trade, the Parthian military may have attempted to compensate by directing power into the Mediterranean basin and attempting to control trade networks within the Roman Empire. This may have been a contributing factor to the wars between Rome and Parthia, and as the wars continued to expand, the Roman treasury was depleted of its reserves and the currency was debased to allow for more funding of military conquest. As Rome was unable to effectively pay its soldiers, it decreased their wages, which drove an insurgency among veterans and active troops alike. Villages had to band together to protect themselves against the rising threat of disenfranchised Roman troops, and this may have been an early source of the system of feudalism. The collapse of ancient Rome was perhaps the single most important geopolitical event in Eurasian history. Understanding this fall is truly essential to preventing a similar collapse in modern society. Ultimately, it is economic instability in the form of endless war, of the debasement of the Roman currency, and of a failure to protect merchants and traders that led to the fall of ancient Rome.